cool autumn afternoon in 2015, a soybean farmer in Michigan was digging in one of his fields. It was a routine job, a simple excavation to lay a new drainage pipe, a task he had performed a dozen times before. His backhoe scraped through the rich, dark soil, trenching the earth. Then he hit something. Not a rock, but something that made a strange, dull scraping sound. He thought it was just an old bent fence post, something his grandfather might have buried decades ago. But when he got out of his cab to pull the object from the mud, he was met with a sight so strange and so impossibly large that it sent a shiver down his spine. He was not holding a piece of farm debris. He was holding the fossilized bone of a colossal prehistoric beast, a monster that had been sleeping beneath his crops for over 11,000 years. This simple farmer had no idea, but he had just stumbled upon a major scientific discovery that would bring a lost, frozen world roaring back to life. To understand the sheer improbability of this discovery, we must peel back the layers of time and journey to a very different Michigan. This is a story that begins not in a quiet soybean field, but in the heart of the last great ice age. Just 20,000 years ago, the land we now know as Michigan was completely unrecognizable. It was buried beneath the colossal Laurentide ice sheet, a single continuous glacier that was, in some places, over 2 miles thick. The immense weight of this ice pressed down on the Earth's crust, and its slow, grinding movement scraped the landscape clean like a giant bulldozer. The world was frozen, silent, and largely lifeless. But then, around 15,000 years ago, the planet began to warm. The great melt began. As the Laurentide ice sheet retreated northward, it unleashed torrents of meltwater and reshaped the continent. The glaciers carved out deep basins that would fill with water to become the Great Lakes, leaving behind a transformed landscape of rolling hills, rich soil, and countless lakes and wetlands. Into this new post-glacial world came a lush ecosystem of spruce forests and grasslands. And with it, the giants. This was the world of the woolly mammoth and its slightly smaller cousin, the American mastodon colossal, shaggy-haired elephants with immense curving tusks. There were giant beavers the size of black bears, ground sloths over 10 feet tall, and predators like the saber-toothed cat and the short-faced bear, larger than any grizzly alive today. For thousands of years, this was their world, a wild, primeval Michigan teeming with colossal beasts. It was also into this world that the first humans arrived, Paleo-Indian hunters who crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Asia. They lived alongside these creatures and they hunted them. But this world would not last. Around 11,000 years ago, a combination of a rapidly changing climate and, many scientists believe, pressure from human hunting led to a mass extinction. The mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats all vanished, leaving only fossilized bones buried deep in mud and peat, waiting to be discovered. Our story now returns to a quiet farm in Lima Township near Chelsea, Michigan. The farm belonged to James Bristle, a man who, like his father and grandfather before him, made his living from the rich soil left behind by ancient glaciers. On this particular day, Jim and his neighbor were digging a trench in a low-lying corner of a soybean field to install a drainage pipe. They were about 8 feet down when the steel bucket of the backhoe struck something solid with a loud, grating noise. Jim thought it was just a large field stone or a buried log, but as he dug around it, he saw it was long, with a strange, uniform shape. He told his neighbor he thought it might be an old bent fence post. They dug around it by hand, wrapped a lifting strap, and used the backhoe to pull it free from the thick mud. When it broke loose and the mud fell away, Jim realized it wasn't wood. The texture was wrong porous, fibrous, a massive, impossibly large, curved bone about 3 feet long. And if this was just one rib, the creature it came from must have been enormous. Jim took a photo and sent it to a friend who passed it to the University of Michigan. It landed in the inbox of Dr. Daniel Fisher, world-renowned paleontologist and director of the Museum of Paleontology. Dr. Fisher instantly recognized it as belonging to a proboscidean, an elephant-like creature. He knew he had to see it in person. When he and his team arrived, they confirmed it was a major find. But there was a problem. Jim had a harvest to bring in and a drainage project to finish before winter. He gave the scientists one day, from sunrise to sunset, to excavate whatever they could. The race against time began. Dr. Fisher called in graduate students and volunteers. This was no delicate brush and pick dig. This was blitzkrieg paleontology. With Jim at the backhoe controls, they unearthed ribs, massive vertebrae, and finally, a nearly complete skull with 2 enormous curving tusks. It was a woolly mammoth. But something was odd. The bones were jumbled, not in anatomical order. Some vertebrae were stacked in a neat pile, and on several bones, they found parallel cut marks made by human tools, a prehistoric pantry. Next to the bones were 3 large boulders, not native to the area. Dr. Fisher concluded they were anchors. His theory, 11,700 years ago, Paleo-Indian hunters killed the mammoth, butchered it, and sank large pieces in a pond to preserve the meat in cold, oxygen-poor water nature's refrigerator. Jim Bristle hadn't just found a mammoth. He had found a prehistoric larder. Legacy of the Bristle mammoth. By the end of the day, the team recovered 40% of the skeleton. Jim donated the entire find to the University of Michigan, saying, "I think it's important that people see this." The Bristle mammoth is now one of the most important Ice Age discoveries in North America, a reminder that the past lies just beneath our feet. And it all began with an ordinary farmer, a backhoe, and a routine job that turned into a journey back 12,000 years.